Digital retail giant Amazon has over 200,000 robots helping deliver more than 350 million different products in an unceasing flow of billions of deliveries. Its massive fulfillment machine with both free and fast shipping has become a key competitive moat against other retailers. Free shipping and 1 or 2 day shipping is why most Amazon customers choose Amazon. So, how can other retailers, whether giants like Walmart or smaller brands, compete? One way is perhaps by stealing a march on the e commerce behemoth and automating themselves. That's boosting growth of the warehouse robotics space more than 15% every year and causing the ecosystem to more than double in size by 2027, hitting over $23 billion in value. And according to industry experts, it's also boosting productivity 200 to 300%, sometimes in simpler ways than you might think. Locus Robotics is a 7-year-old startup with $300 million in funding that's on track to pick a billion items this year. And boosting productivity isn't always about the biggest, smartest, most capable robot that can go anywhere, find anything, take it off the warehouse rack, and bring it where it needs to go. Sometimes it's just about lending a helping hand and letting humans do what they do better. I recently talked to Locus Robotics CMO Karen Leavitt.
Our robots know what the item is. Nobody has to look at a list. The robots go to the location where the item is being stored, and then a worker meets the robot there. And by doing it that way, we are doubling or even tripling the productivity of the humans in that warehouse. And we are cutting down on the amount of walking that they do by probably 75 or 80%. These are people who, without the robots, would be walking 10 to 15 miles a day, and now they're down to just a few miles a day because they're interacting with the robots.
In other words, warehouse robots don't necessarily need to do all of the job. Getting variably sized objects of variable weight off shelves of different heights and depths is a very challenging robotic endeavor. Humans do it much better, at least for now. Robots, however, are much better at wheeling around a multi 100,000 square foot warehouse and saving humans miles of walking. The problem: almost all warehouses do this entirely manually today, says Leavitt.
95% of all of those warehouses do this process entirely manually, where it's
Yeah.
a person pushing a glorified shopping cart through the aisles, walking, as I said, a dozen or more miles a day.
Locus ships robots by what we might call robots as a service, adding extra units during busy times like holidays. Training time for a robot is essentially zero. Connect them to the robotic network, and they'll be assigned tasks and integrated into the flow of work basically immediately. The robots also reduce training time for workers. Instead of 2 to 3 weeks to learn all the tricks of the logistics trade, they can essentially hang out in a specified area of the warehouse. As a robot comes up and flashes some information to them, they can grab the right item and give it to the robot. This makes the humans much more productive, Leavitt says. The second part reduces injuries too. Leavitt says one customer reported an 80% reduction in injuries, plus better job satisfaction due to less fatigue. Of course, multiple things are happening here. The humans are essentially becoming part of a command and control network run by a warehouse or logistics operating system, which, let's be honest, has been happening in some form or another, even in pre digital days. And they're basically told what to pick, when, and where by the robot who comes up for the next item. And secondly, as robots get better, smarter, more capable, and cheaper, eventually the robots will be able to add the picking part of the job as well. Or Locus and other robotics manufacturers will create a second class of robots, one that doesn't just move product from place to place, but essentially replaces the picking people in the warehouse racks so that one robot moves the product while another robot goes and gets it. That may be a ways off, but it does seem inevitable to me. It doesn't seem to be something that any robotics company wants to admit, however.
3 or 4 years ago, I worried about that tension, but we haven't seen it. And the reason we haven't seen it is because the growth rate in the fulfillment warehouse area has just been so strong that the ability to find, hire, and retain labor is still the biggest challenge warehouse operators face.
That makes sense. But as we start to see Amazon use robots like the Fanuc 6-axis robot that can lift 1,200 kilogram pallets high in the air, and other smaller robots come on the market with very dexterous fingers, you have to think the days are approaching when all the jobs in shipping and fulfillment can be done by robots. And of course, managed by complex software to optimize timing and productivity.
We're really turning these warehouses into digital command centers. We put up monitors everywhere that create dashboards, and we see not just the supervisors and the executives looking at these dashboards, but the workers looking at them. They can see how their actions are contributing to the output in the warehouse, and they can take action as a result of that.
With Amazon and Walmart nearly tied right now in their percentage of US retail sales, and other brands struggling to keep up, that kind of automation is not just critical for Walmart to achieve in order to compete, but for any other retailer as well. So I'm trying something a little new here. I'm doing a segment where I'm basically talking through the story as I see it, inserting quotes from my guests, and then putting the entire interview lower on in the podcast. So you can hear what I think about the situation, the story, the news, the events, and how I'm bringing in sources into that, as well as the full interview for complete context. I'd love to get some feedback on what you're thinking about it, how you feel about it, if you like it, if you hate it. Just hit me up on Twitter at John Koetsier and let me know. Here's the rest of the interview. When will robots be a real factor in reducing manual labor and freeing humans from boring, repetitive, maybe even dangerous jobs? Well, we might be there right now. Locus Robotics says that its warehouse robots have picked 650 million packages to date and will hit its billionth this year. Right now, we're joined with Locus CMO Karen Leavitt. Welcome.
Hey, John, how are you doing? Nice to meet you.
Doing really well. Thank you for joining us here. Maybe set the stage. What do your robots do?
Okay, well, first I'm going to correct you because we've now picked about 705 million. Okay.
Stop working. You're going too
I,
fast. You're
I
making
know
me wrong.
those darn robots. So what do our robots do? The best way to characterize that is to put in a context everybody understands. When you order an item online, and it gets transmitted to the merchant. In fact, what's happening is your order is getting transmitted to a warehouse. And in that warehouse, the raw material that's providing you with the merchandise you just ordered is human labor. So somebody is looking at the order you just placed, going to a specific location in the warehouse where that item is stored, picking it off of a shelf, putting into sort of a glorified shopping cart, and then shipping it out the door to get to you. And what our robots do is they help eliminate several of those steps in the human process that makes the job much easier for the worker. So our robots know what the item is. Nobody has to look at a list. The robots go to the location where the item is being stored, and then a worker meets the robot there. And by doing it that way, we are doubling or even tripling the productivity of the humans in that warehouse. And we're cutting down on the amount of walking that they do by probably 75 or 80%. These are people who, without the robots, would be walking 10 to 15 miles a day. And now they're down to just a few miles a day because they're interacting with the robots. So, what do our robots do? They make people's lives easier, and they get you your merchandise faster, and they do it in a predictable way that makes it profitable for their business operators.
Now, you said something about your robots. The people meet your robots there. Where's
Mhm.
that meeting point? Is that after the robot has gone into the warehouse, done the pick, come back to where it gets packed or shipped or something like that?
Yeah, so the merchandise is stored throughout the warehouse. So imagine hundreds of thousands of square feet of bookshelves, uh,
Mhm,
not
mhm.
bookshelves, of racks that
Yes.
contain merchandise. And the robot is going to go directly to the location where the item that needs to be picked is stored. The
Yes.
workers who would ordinarily be serpentining through the aisles pushing a cart are actually, because we've got the robots now, they're stationed in locations in that warehouse near the racks. And then when they see a robot stop, they walk over to the robot just a few paces and they follow the instructions on the screen to pick the right item, scan it, and drop it into the robot's container. And then
I
the
actually have some
robot, oh,
go ahead,
sorry.
sorry.
No, sorry, I was gonna say then the robot will move to the next pick in the order. We call them picks when people make the selection off the shelves. The robot will go to where the next item needs to be picked off the shelves. And that could be on the other side of the warehouse where it may be met by an entirely different worker. Under
Mhm.
ordinary circumstances, before our robots were introduced, the workers would start their journey by loading up a cart with empty containers, and then they would walk all through the warehouse. So, to get that next pick, they would have to walk through the warehouse. But now the robot does that.
I have some experience with that because when I was in university, I worked for a while overnight in a warehouse, sometimes picking and shipping stuff, sometimes building stuff, other things like that. And you have lots of challenges with that, including the traveling salesman problem, of course, right? Like, what's the most efficient route to get all of these 25 different items that I need? Humans are not good at that. At least this human isn't. And I don't think humans are generally. It's a really challenging situation. So it's kind of cool if you can get the robots to do that and they're connected to the operating system essentially of the warehouse to know what to do, where to go, all that stuff. Now, you had a bit of a moment last year around Black Friday, Cyber Monday, one of the busiest e-commerce sections of the year. Tell me about that. How many total packages did you pick during that week or a couple weeks?
Yeah, we picked about 120 million units. Our robots assisted their human coworkers in picking about 120 million units in Cyber Week this year. Just to put that in context, our robots helped pick about 380 million for the entire year. So you can see that that peak season is such a huge part of the total business for the year for our customers. And that's up from about 70 million during the same period a year earlier. But one of the things that was interesting this year was that people started shopping earlier. Instead of
Mhm.
having all of their orders crammed into that period from Black Friday to Cyber Monday, people started ordering earlier so that they could ensure that their packages would get to their loved ones in time for the holidays. So it was an extended period. So really, you can think of peak as having been even bigger than
Mhm.
that jump up from the year before.
That
Um,
is kind of fascinating, actually. 1 in 4 packages that you picked in 2021 was during that period of Cyber Monday, Black Friday, in and around there. That's a massive, massive spike that has gotta be hugely challenging to staff for, and I guess to robot for as well.
Well, that's exactly right. So this is this underscores the value that we provide to our customers. So who are our customers? Our customers are the people who run the warehouses where that merchandise is being stored. And it's not always consumer goods. When we talk about Black Friday, of course, we're talking typically about e-commerce merchandise that people are
Mhm,
ordering for consumer purposes. But the same could be true of merchandise that's, well, not really merchandise, um, medical devices, pacemakers,
mhm.
and joint replacements that are stored in a medical device warehouse, or auto parts in a parts warehouse. But all of these things have one thing in common: they're stored in one big, large facility, and they have to get out to their final consumers, whether those are business consumers, medical consumers, or personal consumers, in a timely fashion. So the folks who run these warehouses They're really experts at leveraging the supply chain. This is the
Hmm.
heart of the supply chain economy. And in most of those warehouses, 95% of all of those warehouses do this process entirely manually, where it's
Yeah.
a person pushing a glorified shopping cart through the aisles, walking, as I said, a dozen or more miles a day to get this merchandise. And demand for e-commerce picks or online ordered picks has increased dramatically over the last decade, but of course during the pandemic it spiked up even more sharply. Labor has become more difficult to find, and frankly
Hmm.
it's a really challenging job. It's exhausting. So, what our robots do is they help make that job not only easier for the workers by reducing their walking time, reducing the number of errors involved, just making it easier so they're not pushing heavy carts, but it also delivers a lot of actionable intelligence to the business operator. We are giving our customers an enormous amount of information, not just reams of spreadsheets, but dashboards and things that they can actually take action against right this minute. So they can know
Hmm.
where to direct the workers in the warehouse. They know what their labor requirements are going to be, and then because the robots operate as a coordinated fleet, when our customer's business reaches this peak level, we ship them more robots. They hire more temporary workers. And at the same time, they hire more robotic workers. And so we will ship them additional robots for just a 2 or 3 month period during the peak season. And then in January, they ship those extra robots back to us. So our customers are really getting just in time and just on budget resources to get done the job that they need to serve their customers.
Well, that's pretty interesting because, of course, when you bring on temporary labor, you've got to train temporary labor. Humans don't
That's right.
instantly know, oh, that's where everything is. That's how I do it. That's how you do things here. The robots, on the other hand, plug them in and there you go, right?
That's exactly right. It takes about 3 minutes, and that's probably generous. From the time from the time that the carton is opened on the loading dock and the joins the rest of its robot friends to start working, the robot immediately latches onto the robot network and starts to work. And then our software platform knits together all of the instructions. We interface with other systems in the warehouse to take orders that are coming in from consumers at home, and we give direction not just to the robots about what to do next. Hey robot, step forward, we're going to send you out on a mission to go get some merchandise, but we also instruct the workers on what they're supposed to do. So you raised a
Hmm.
really great point that typically in an unautomated warehouse, it takes about 2 weeks to train a new worker, whether the worker is permanent or temporary. But with the robots are not just carrying merchandise through the warehouse, they're also carrying instructions for the workers. So the training for a worker is, hey, you see that robot over there? When you see
Do what
its
it
legs
tells you to
turn
do.
green, walk over and do
Your
whatever it
robotic
tells you.
overlords are now in charge.
Exactly. Do whatever it tells you to do. Well, they're friendly. They're very friendly, and they use lots of
Friendly.
pictures and a very familiar interface. So it really makes people's jobs easier. And we have not just the executives who are making the buying decisions, but the workers in the warehouse themselves tell us all the time how much they love working with the robots. It's really a sight to behold when you see hundreds of robots and dozens of workers working side by side in a warehouse.
So let's get into that in just a bit, what that looks like and how that'll evolve over time. Before that, what gets better when you add robots into a warehouse? How much faster are you picking things? How much more accurate are you? Are there fewer injuries?
All of those things. So We suffer from sort of having a laundry list of benefits, which is, I guess, a really good problem to have.
It's a
Um,
horrible thing to suffer from.
Yep, our customers are constantly quoting this litany of benefits. So starting right out of the gate with productivity, it's we typically will double or triple the rate at which the workers can do their job. We
Mhm,
do that, of course, by and in addition to making the worker's job easier, we're also making them much more productive. And we can do it very predictably so that our customers can plan ahead for what their capacity is going to be
mhm.
and really be able to count on that. As far as error rates go, well, it's the robot that's checking to make sure that you've picked the right item off the shelf. Warehouses can be
Or that the
crowded,
robot
right?
has picked the right item off the shelf?
That the worker has picked the right item off the shelf, but the robot is verifying that. So
So, who I
warehouses,
thought the robot was picking the item off the shelf?
the robot doesn't do the picking. The robots don't have arms. I have a
Oh,
robot right here.
okay,
I have a miniature of the robot right here. But
okay,
the
gotcha,
robot moves around on wheels through the warehouse
okay.
using a series of cameras and laser beams.
So then
Um,
you have to have workers stationed at various points, and the robot basically sends up the bat signal, it starts flashing or something, "Help me out," and says, "Hey, pick that thing, put it on my deck," type of thing?
that's exactly it. So the robot will
Okay.
go to the merchandise location. It will sit positioned just next to where the item is, so any worker glancing at it knows immediately where the item to be picked is can be found. And then the robot has on it an iPad, a touch
Okay.
screen which will display a picture of the item and say the exact location. The worker will pick from that location because people are still best at this move, this motion.
Mhm,
The
mhm.
worker will pick it, will scan it on the scanner that's built into the robot, and we'll put it into the robot's container. It could be a whole variety of
Okay.
different container types. And
And then
then
it'll take it to a different station where somebody else will
that's
put it
exactly
take it out, put it on a box or something like that. So
that's
in
it.
essence,
It'll go
you're
get
going from having a scenario where you have people wandering around picking, then taking somewhere, then packaging, then shipping, to a scenario where you've got some people spread around the warehouse looking for robots in need of help, putting the thing on the robot goes off to shipping and receiving, it gets packaged, boom, and out the door. Is that correct?
That's correct. And most important, remember that for the warehouse generates most of its revenue from the act of that pick. When it's taking something to ship to a consumer is when their top line revenue comes in. So what we're
Mhm.
doing is we're taking workers and putting them on the most revenue intensive part of the job, which is the pick, instead of the time consuming, wasted non revenue part of the job, which is walking through the warehouse.
That is interesting though, because that's gonna be a change, right? That's a significant change because if you're running a warehouse and what you're probably gonna do is you're gonna have, I don't know what the number is, but you're gonna have some people who are hanging out in your aisles looking for those robots who need a bit of assistance. And then you're gonna have some people elsewhere. The time you're saving is the person pushing the cart around and walking the 15 kilometers or 15 miles a day or whatever the case might be. But that is a bit of an interesting change, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't. So it's not as if there are, hordes of workers hanging out on the aisle street corners waiting for a robot to come along.
One for every bay.
Yeah, right, but and actually, it's usually not every base. So this is where the intelligence comes into the process. That we're able to work together with the other systems in the warehouse to predict when the loads of orders are going to come down, what the workload is going to be required of both robots and workers, so our customers will staff appropriately. If it's the
Mhm.
type of business where a lot of orders come in overnight, then they're going to be fully staffed early in the morning. If they tend to get orders early in the morning, in the past, they may have had to bring workers in early just to clear whatever backlog so they'd be prepared for the crush. But now
Mhm.
they can have their workers report to work just in time and be there for when the large orders come through. But then our software does something magical. We don't just send orders out all through the warehouse. We don't send robots necessarily all through the warehouse. We selectively choose the orders that we're going to be picking right this second and cluster orders together so that
Mhm.
on a
Mhm.
robot like this that may have, obviously this is a miniature version of the robot, but it might have multiple containers on it with different compartments. So this robot might be picking 6 different orders simultaneously of, say,
Mhm.
school supplies to go to
Mhm.
a family that's in the back to school area, and we're going to choose 6 orders whose contents are located in close proximity to one another in the
Sure.
warehouse. So
Sure.
what we're doing is we're optimizing for the density of work, density on the robot and density within the warehouse. So
Cool. Cool. So, let's talk about the humans then, because I'm firmly a believer that we need more robotics. We need more automation. We want to not have people working in jobs that could be really boring for some, maybe not for all, that tend to wear them out. I mean, we've seen the horror stories from workers in Amazon warehouses, for instance. I mean, repetitive stress injuries, back injuries, all kinds of things, just general not doing well because being pushed to go faster, 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 and keep up with this incredible pace of stuff that we're buying stuff online and on mobile on. So I'm a big believer in that. But there's also the reality that people need to feed their families, people need to pay the rent. And there's a fear that adding robots means taking jobs. Talk about that tension and how you see that. And if there is a tension, how we resolve it.
sure. So I'll tell you, 3 or 4 years ago, I worried about that tension, but we haven't seen it. And the reason we haven't seen it is because the growth rate in the fulfillment warehouse area has just been so strong that the ability to find, hire, and retain labor is still the biggest challenge warehouse operators face. They're not operating on the belief that, oh my gosh, I want to lay off my entire workforce. On the contrary, they're operating on the principle that I really want to be able to attract and retain the best workers here. And in order to do that, I want to be able to make sure that their jobs are more meaningful. And by pairing them with robots, the human and the robot get to share the work in a way that's appropriate for both of them. The human is going to do the thinking and the manual dexterity tasks. The robot's going to be doing the carrying and the traveling tasks, and they work together beautifully. If you were to go and visit our website, you would see, literally, we have a love story video of workers just standing there talking about how much they love working with the robots, how much it's made their jobs easier. It doesn't just make their job easier, it means that they can be a better worker in a way that's more fulfilling for them and more beneficial to the employer, because now, instead of spending their time traipsing through aisles, they can become an expert on their area of the warehouse. They can start to make contributions back, recommendations about best practices for how to optimize their section of the warehouse. And what we do is we're really turning these warehouses into digital command centers. We put up monitors everywhere that create dashboards, and we see not just the supervisors and the executives looking at these dashboards, but the workers looking at them. They can see how their actions are contributing to the output in the warehouse, and they can take action as a result of that. So we're really enabling that. We also, to create a little fun, we also build gamification into our robots so that workers can sort of compete either against themselves or against their coworkers for, to make things a little bit more interesting. They can set targets and see how fast they're picking. So there's really a tremendous feedback loop there. And then you'd mentioned earlier Things like reduction in injury rates. We have one customer who quotes to us an 80% reduction in injuries. When workers are pushing carts, those carts, over the course of a roughly 1 hour or 90-minute mission of snaking through the warehouse, can get up to 200 or 300 pounds. We have a customer in the UK who refers to the carts as widowmakers, and
Wow.
not so tongue in cheek. So they see an 80% reduction in injuries, but also you've got workers who are just less fatigued. So there's really a sense of empowerment that comes from this rather than a sense of displacement.
That's interesting to hear because I recently interviewed the CEO of German Bionic, which makes an exoskeleton essentially for manual laborers that takes some of the weight if you're lifting something, if you're walking long distances. And some of the feedback that they got was that workers who were dead tired at the end of the day, and for instance, couldn't play with their kids or do some other tasks that they want to do in their personal life, now have that energy. So that makes sense. I hope that the other things also stay true when the robot gets good enough to pick itself from the cart, and I hope that we find ways to integrate humans into that to add value and to do better things as well. Maybe let's end here. We're getting better all the time at electronics, at automation, at robotics. What does your solution look like in 5 years?
In 5 years, well, first, we're expanding our product family. We'll be announcing some new additions to the family in a few months where we've got different form factors so that we can carry not just um, not just 100-pound or fewer items, but hundreds of pounds or thousands of pounds even of
Wow.
merchandise, so that we can carry larger objects through the warehouse. We already are starting to expand into more use cases in the warehouse itself, not just outbound fulfillment, that is picking, but also returns. Over the
Mm.
holidays this year, people ordered a lot of things that they were going to return, and that trend is continuing. Getting things from one dock door to another. And then, of course, yes, there are people all the time who are searching for ways of alleviating the need for human labor in certain, as you said, repetitive and tedious tasks. So the technology does get better all the time, and we're looking forward to the day when that happens. But the humans won't disappear. The humans will move on to other tasks in the warehouse. Warehouses are complex digital environments, and humans will move into other areas where now that the robots are improving the state of material movement in one area, it means that there will be really high demand for jobs of people who are looking to interpret those actions downstream from there. So people will still have roles.
Very good. I remember one of the roles that I had sometimes when we were taking a break is we'd go for a little ride on some of the machines. I wonder if that happens on the robots. I won't ask that question, however, but thank you for this time, Karen. I do appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Very nice to meet you.